welcome to the January 17th to 2024 3DHP Monthly Forum. Most of you know this is a USGS cooperative intended to engage state and local governments and private sector partners in the derivation of the 3D hydrography data set. I've changed this up a little. We're just going to go over some quick activities. First of all, know that all of our forums, as well as our interest group meetings, are recorded, and they, along with the PowerPoints and the Q&A docs, are posted to the NSGIC knowledge base. So I get a lot of questions every time about whether it will be recorded. They're all there, so if you want to go back and look at old ones, that's where they are. You can search for them on 3DHP or forum, you do need to log in to access the materials. You can look at what's available, but you do need to log in with the website to access the materials. If you're registering for this workshop, then you should have a login with the website. Current activities, we're very happy to say that we were renewed for the 2024 project year. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to continued work with USGS. And we have a 2024 work plan in development right now. Just a quick update on other things that are still happening following up from last year. The culvert mapping good practices, we've created a community workspace. It's basically a document where we're proposing practices and a minimum attribute set. And we're really looking for contributions, ideas, comments. So please check out that space. All of this is available at the hub. Your contributions are needed. So please go take a look at that and see if what works for you, what doesn't, because we would ultimately like to publish a good practices guidance document. Inventory of state 3D hydrography experiences. We've done this every year. Now's the time of year we're going to reach out to you. You can provide a detailed or a brief form to share your EDH and 3DH activities and experiences. And again, we would love you to get in there and either update or add information. This is a valuable resource for other states that are looking to pursue activities and may want to reach out to you for, or want to learn from your experience or reach out for guidance. The 3D NTM data acquisition planning guide, this is our main project for this year is to expand the existing 3D planning guide to include 3DHP, and we are working on the outline of that. And again, we'll work cooperatively with the 3DEP FTN project to build one guide that can basically support both the acquisition of either data set, because there's so much overlap with regards to coordination, things like that. And then we'll pull out those things that are specific to each program. These and many other resources, thanks to Phil, are available at the hub. So that's your go-to place for more information about the project. Most of you are aware there's a 3DHP FDN interest group. We hold these meetings on occasion at the same time period, usually about 3 times a year. If you're not a member of the interest group, you can join at mynisgic.com. And if you're not a NSGIC member, you can still join using this prospects page. Again, then you'll get direct notifications. If you're getting your notifications about these meetings indirectly, I encourage you to sign up with the interest group. There's also a hydrography stewards community, and that's a community not just for NHD stewards, but all folks that manage statewide hydrography. And so you can, if you're interested, or if you have folks in your state that should be participating in this dialogue, I encourage you, they can fill out this form. And I know there is a meeting scheduled for January 29th. Jane, I see that you're on the call. Do you want to add anything?
Sure. Yes, we're planning to have a 1-hour discussion January 29th at 11 to 12 Pacific time. And this got started based on a discussion post that I posted a couple of weeks ago. The state stewards for California, Pennsylvania, and Washington will update the community on what we have learned and wish to learn about creating elevation-derived hydrography that meets USGS standards and specifications and quality checking EDH deliverables from contractors. This happened because last month I discovered that there was more that we needed to know about the USGS specifications for EDH. And so I just want to share that with any other state stewards who are interested, and we'll have conversations about those topics. And Ellen Ferris from Pennsylvania will talk about what they're doing, and then Josh Greenberg from Washington State will be speaking also. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, you'll see at the end of this meeting, Jane, I did want you to know we did talk to USGS 3DHP, and Sylvia Terziati will be presenting at next month's info forum, so we can follow up on the discussion you have with the hydrography stewards and get that information out to the full community.
All right, we appreciate that.
So, any questions on what's happening with the projects, where we are, or things going on? Hearing none, I'd like to turn it over then to Jim Gigliano and Andrew Brenner for their presentation today. Jim is a longtime NSGIC member and longtime GIS coordinator, GIO go-to guy in Wisconsin. I don't know much about Andrew. Would you like to fill us in on your background?
Sure, yeah, I've been working in geospatial for about 20 years. Prior to that, I worked in research, really focused in on how to how to use geospatial data for solving natural resource problems. And so this is a culmination of a lot of the ideas and items I've been working on for a long time.
Outstanding, thank you. You guys can go ahead and present.
Okay.
Please enter your questions into the chat at any time. We will address them after the presentation, but I am capturing them for discussion after the presentation. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. I'll just turn on my video for a second here. Hi, I'm Jim Giuliano, and like Linda said, I'm the GIO in Wisconsin. And first of all, I really appreciate everything Linda has done for us over the years with working on this in between the programs and NSGIC, and really helping with a lot of the education and the networking. And of course, we couldn't have done it without NSGIC, and we couldn't have done it without, great federal partners and all the states and contractors and interested people helping out. So this is always good. Always learn a lot, and so it's our chance to give back a little bit here. So without further ado, we're going to talk about what Andrew likes to call harmonizing the three biggie layers here. And let's see here. There we go. So we sort of have a vision here in Wisconsin, and luckily it very nicely matched what our friends at NV5 were doing and had some interest in.
Jim, you're not sharing your slides.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got so carried away there. There we go. Is that better?
There you go. We got it.
There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll stop doing the video thing. There we go. All right. So we got this vision. Andrew's going to talk about the federal data sets that we're talking about here, and give some background on the concept, which are mainly his, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to try to turn this into a program instead of a pilot project. So so to get started, you've all been here over the years. We've all had the issues with our data is out of date. It's made by different agencies and different levels of government. And whenever we're trying to get something fixed up, there's always that better, faster, cheaper line that somebody pulls out. Well, the real answer is we need it now, and we need it so that we can use it for all the real world problems that our agencies are dealing with. We finished up our first round of our statewide lidar. We're starting our second round, and we want to use it while it's current. And since the 3DHP program has come along, we want to jump on that. And but it also points out that there are other programs out there that aren't as well funded, but equally important, and in particular, things like the NWI Wetlands. Wisconsin has a lot of wetlands, and those programs are not quite at the same funding level, and so there's things going on there. There has been some discussions between the federal agencies that we kind of hear about, and we'd like to be included in that. And so this is kind of one of our ways to draw some attention to those local issues. And of course, when we are talking about new models, new data models, they have to meet everybody's needs. And in particular, we get a lot here at the state. We get a lot of it. These things just don't meet our needs, and so we got to keep working at it. So what happened here? 3DHP, really, the discussions really started back in 21. We kept hearing about it. We went to NSGIC meetings and learned about it, and we started thinking about how to do it. What really sort of galvanized things in Wisconsin is in the fall of 21, we had a major climate change assessment document come out by a state organized group, and carbon mapping was one of the topics that really sort of took hold in our imaginations. And we started discussing it, and they got the little diagram there that shows how different practices store carbon in the landscape, and so thinking about how data and GIS data analysis and other things play into that really got us going. And these all sort of coalesced. Talking to Andrew, one day we were I think talking about lidar, and we got onto this carbon mapping thing, and a couple months later, Andrew had a white paper for us, which was really helpful, which helped me to sort of sell it to our folks internally. And in the white paper, we used kind of two Huck 10 areas as targets, and we were able to sort of springboard off of that. So what became of that? Timing is everything, right? And in July of 22, NOAA's BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Habitat Restoration funding started to become available to our coastal program. And I work for a gentleman who is both in charge of the land information program and the Wisconsin coastal program. So I get to ask questions to his side of things. And this the BIL money for habitat restoration was coming along in great big buckets full. And a part of that was a capacity grant. So we latched onto that, and we talked to our friends in Brown County, which is the county that contains Green Bay and is right on the Green Bay waterway, and started talking to them. And the next thing that happened was we included this project in our application to NOAA for the BIL capacity funding. And so what we ended up with was a 3-year project with Brown County, and they would be the sort of the recipients, and they went through the process of doing an RFP, a scope of work and all that. Hired NV5 last November, and now we're in the process of actually cranking out the data. And I'm sort of working on getting some of the other partners involved in setting up some applications so that we can test the data and be able to demonstrate it in 2025. And then of course there's always the report to the major funding agency. So here's our little target area. This is half of it's in Brown County and the other half's in Outagamie County. These are Huck 10s that flow into the Green Bay. They're a nice mixture of agriculture and urban and suburban, and right in the middle is the Oneida Nation. So we've got some really interesting partners on this project. And like I said, the Brown County folks are kind of our nexus, our hub, and NV5 is our main contractor, and they've subcontracted with St. Mary's in Minnesota to do the wetlands part. So I think that's all I have for this section, and turning it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Jim. So what I want to do in the first few slides is sort of give you the big picture of why sort of the one map concept is necessary and why it's sort of evolved and now. Everybody on the call understands that the GIS data is critical to pretty much everything we do, and especially in the environmental region. But for historical reasons, each agency has developed their own specifications. And so what we need to answer management questions is good data that works together, that doesn't require us to caveat the decisions that we're making. And so what we need is good data that we can use for understanding climate adaptations. We can use at a management scale. And that allows us to look at both the water cycle and the carbon cycle, which is fundamentally what we are trying to understand with resiliency and with landscape management. And then the other thing is, as Jim mentioned, no one agency has enough money to do everything. And so by working in a partnership concept, we can leverage money between agencies and between users and agencies in order to ensure that everybody gets access to high quality data at the scale they need. Next slide. So historically, the reason why these data sets, the NHD, NWI, the National Land Cover Dataset, or CCAP, or DFIRMs have all been developed by different agencies at different scales. And that makes sense based on their evolution. The problem is when we try to merge these data sets together and come up with a decision, because we all know that if we look at the wetland area from CCAP, is different from the wetland area from NWI, and it's different from wetland areas on NHD. Wouldn't it be great if we all could have, all worked off the same consistent data set? So the scales of these data sets were developed were different, and that's because of the underlying source data. The definitions were different. And so it led to challenges in terms of actually coming to conclusions, and obviously different people with different data sets can spend a lot of time arguing about which data set's right. So that's sort of where we are right now. Next slide. Why does it make sense to change that framework now? And the real reason is because we now have the source data, so the imagery and lidar, at a scale that we can use for decision making, and we can develop all these data sets off those data that are national in scope. And USGS deserves a lot of the credit for developing that lidar data set and Same with the other federal agencies for the imagery data set, and the states, of course, also. So now we have the same scale of source data. We have the ability to create this data set at an operational decision-making scale, so land cover at a high resolution, rather 30 meter. We can do it nationally because it links with mandates and objectives of federal agencies. If we do it together and use the technology that are available now, we can reduce the cost and increase the consistency and therefore the utility. And we all need to think about that because we are facing significant stress as a result of land cover and climate change. Next slide. And so what we're wanting to do is manage the landscape. And to manage the landscape, we need accurate information. We need actionable information at a decision-making scale. We need it to be consistent. And we need to understand not just water, not just carbon, but how these two cycles interact together. And so the point of this is then to bring these data sets together in a common framework. And that's what we're calling one map. Next slide. So this sort of gives you a really high level overview of things that everyone on this call already understands. The hydrography influences the wetlands. The wetlands is related to the land cover. The land cover affects the carbon. The land cover, water, and wetlands affect the flooding, right? So we've got these four domains that have historically developed their data sets in isolation, or at least not directly connected with each other, and actually just connecting these data sets together. And hopefully with the one map concept, these will be consistent, they will be integrated, and they can be produced at a lower cost. Next slide. So this sort of shows you the different agencies that that are mandated or have ownership of these programs: Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the NWI. We have USGS on the 3DHP. We have NRCS involved. We have Forest Service looking at carbon. We have NOAA looking at the Coastal Change Analysis Program, CCAP, FEMA working on the DFIRM. So, you know, we have these agencies that all share the same objectives, but have different specifications, and that makes it hard for all the data sets to play together. Next slide. So this is probably a little unnecessary for this audience, but you know, basically, you know, we got the 3DHP that everyone understands. We're creating the ponds, the lakes, the rivers, the streams. We're connecting it together. We're creating culverts. We have the line work coming out of the 3DHP program. We have the catchments, and then we also have the potential of integrating with storm sewer systems. Next slide. And you click again. So this allows us to integrate the hydrography with all the applications that we have, whether they be looking at the natural resources, whether they're related to water quality, water supply, or flooding, or any of these other things. And so 3DHP will enter these analyses. Now, many of these analyses require hydrography, but they also require other data, such as land cover, such as wetlands, in order to be able to come to the conclusion. Imagine if we had a data set where we don't have to say, oh, we don't have to massage one data set to fit into the other. Next slide. So the 3DHP process produces obviously the data sets that we understand, that the rivers, the rivers and the streams and the network and the watersheds, but there's a whole lot of other data sets that are developed, such as the topographic index, that are also data sets that are used for mapping land cover and mapping wetlands. And so if we produce these data sets once, it allows us to then be able to utilize them multiple times in multiple parts of the mapping ecosystem. So rather than have one group produce the data set 3 times, I mean, you could have the landscape data being produced by 3 different agencies, all from the same source data. If we're able to do it once and have that data set flow throughout the overall mapping ecosystem, that saves us time, improves consistency, and reduces cost. Next slide. So many of you may be familiar with CCAP, or the Coastal Change Analysis Program. This data set has existed alongside the National Land Cover data set for many decades. It is moving, or has moved, to a higher resolution where it's based off the NAPE imagery. So the source data is leaf on 60 centimeter data. The data set is a raster data set. There are 3 data layers for the coastal regions that have been developed and being distributed by NOAA. One is a water layer, second one is an impervious layer, and the third one is a canopy divided into tree and shrub layers. So those data sets have already been produced and are available for the coastal zone. Next click. Thank you. So what we want to do is then develop from those layers into a land cover data set that has around 18 classes. This has a specification developed by NOAA, and that starts to provide really detailed information on that land cover. So if we compare that to the 30-meter NLCD, which is really impressive for monitoring change on a national scale, this provides information at a resolution that we can start making management decisions on. It tells us where the canopy is, the pasture, the impervious, the wetlands. And so we use these remote sensing methods to get at these land cover data sets that have an input from NWI and an input from the 3DHP. And so instead of replicating the same process twice, we're able to have these data sets flow into this system. Next slide. And then since we have lidar, it then allows us to start to get towards what the carbon storage is going to be for those land covers. So of course we have the land covers broken down into their various types, but all we have at the initial scale is an idea of whether you've got forest or non-forest, not whether it's big or small. And with the lidar, it allows us to be able to differentiate between whether it's a large, tall forest, whether it's a dense forest, or whether it's a small regeneration area. Obviously, if we have QL2 data, it allows us to get an idea of the canopy height. If we have QL1 data, it allows us to move towards individual tree segmentation. And then the lidar can also be used to help us divide between which areas are evergreen and which areas are deciduous. Next slide. And so as we dig down through the classification level, so at the CCAP level, which we call the level 2, we're able to classify areas into evergreen and deciduous. We may want to go further than that, obviously adding the height element, but we can also leverage off the immense amount of work that's been done by states and the federal government in creating the 30-meter data set that utilizes a lot of on-ground sampling that can get us down to a species or a major association level. And then that allows us to improve the level of information we've got at high resolution. We're using that high resolution level 2 to delineate the landscape, and then using the level 3 data from that 30-meter information to actually be able to refine the classification. Next slide. So that sort of covers a little bit on the land cover side. Then we also want to understand and link it in with the NWI. So we have the NWI tells us information about the wetlands, and we can utilize the information from the 3DHP and information from the CCAP that will get us 50 to 60% of the way to a final NWI classification. NWI is probably one of the programs that has the least amount of funding. And so if we are able to improve the quantity of NWI mapping that we can using these two programs, that would benefit both in terms of understanding the hydrography and also understanding the carbon. Next slide. And so by bringing in the information from CCAP, by bringing information from 3DHP, we then can produce data sets. It doesn't get you the answer straight away, but it allows you, gets you 50% of the way towards the answer, producing the same quality data set to the NWI specification, but at lower cost and producing it faster, and also increasing the consistency of data sets between the regions and across the agencies. Next slide. So then we can have this information on land cover. We have information on where the wetlands are. We have information on the rivers and the streams and the culverts and the transects of where the rivers flow, so the river valleys. And that allows us to start to understand how water will flow within those areas and relate to this potential for flooding. Now, there is no hydraulic modeling as part of this. However, the input data to those hydraulic and hydrologic models can be produced by this suite of data sets that then allow us to create an understanding of which areas are going to be flooding, what's the drainage area, what's the roughness, what's the curve number, etc. All the information you need enable to understand current flooding conditions and the potential flooding in the future. Next slide. So the idea of the one map is that we are producing those foundational data sets that allow us to produce an understanding of both the carbon cycle and the water cycle, both in terms of what its current situation is and how it will go in the future. And that helps us understand what we need to do to maintain those landscapes, make them more resilient, understand the carbon storage, the carbon sequestration rate, tree growth rates, and also, sequestration within wetlands. Next slide. So that's one side of the question. The other side, which I think everyone's familiar with, is understanding, well, what happens, in terms of pollution, non-point source pollution, sedimentation, and erosion. And so this information also provides that foundational data set that allows agencies, local agencies, to apply models without having to recreate the underlying data sets, and allows them to, because it's a federal national data set, allows them to apply models consistently across the whole landscape. So one of the key things here is that by adhering to a federal standard, the models that we develop for our specific area can also be leveraged across multiple parts of the country. That reduces the cost both for data creation, but also for application, because we have consistency in the way things are classified. Next slide. And that leads, obviously what everyone's very concerned about is how is the changing climate going to affect flooding, flooding is affected by land cover, it's affected by wetlands, it's affected by the rivers and the streams and the lakes and the culverts. And so having these data sets together allow us to look at what we can do to retain water on the landscape through green infrastructure, what we can do to allow reduce blockages, allow flow into the receiving waters, etc. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do now is sort of show you in the next set of slides sort of how these parts fit together in a jigsaw. A lot more detail than I'm going to show right now. Happy to answer questions later. But you know, the first part of the process is pulling together the lidar data sets. I think since we didn't collect lidar on a watershed basis, we usually have to mesh together different lidar data sets that may have been collected at different times, different years, different sensors. So we harmonize and process. We go back to the original point clouds and we create ground variables that could be topographic index, DEMs, and we do above ground variables that relate to the tree canopy, the buildings, etc. So that's the first step. Next click. Then we ingest in the data sets that I said that NOAA have been produced. So impervious, canopy, and water. Those data sets are good, but not good enough for what we need in terms of producing a final usable land cover data set. So we utilize the lidar to help clean up the canopy. We review the water layers, we review the impervious layers and produce a final data set. Next click. And then these data sets flow into our EDH or our 3DHP production sets. So we got the ground variables, and then we also have information on the water bodies. So we have water body consistency between that. And so that reduces the cost of developing that 3DHP data sets, the watersheds and the culverts. Next slide. Then what we do is we've got those canopy, shrub, impervious, water cleaned up water data sets, and we bring in the imagery and we process it through a series of machine learning and editing QC processes to create our CCAP level 1. So that is just the large, impervious, and water and land cover categories, bare, and wetland. And click, next click. And then we bring in the 3DHP data and the canopy data and the CCAP data, and it allows us to develop that NWI data set that in a more effective fashion, because instead of repeating the same processes, we utilize the data sets that have already been created. Next slide. Then we can utilize the wetland data sets to allow us to refine the CCAP into the more fine level 2 classes. We add ag, we add open space developed, and we break out the wetland classes of that. And then we get to that national CCAP level 2. Next slide. And then the final data sets here is that we take the level 2, we bring in the 30-meter data sets, we do some analysis from that, we bring in the NWI layers, and then we come up with our 3D level 3 classification. Next slide. So this as Jim said, we just started this project in the fall. We've got the first sets of data just running off the presses right now. This is straight out of production. So we're hoping to get these data sets into the reviewer's hands in the next couple of weeks, but that just sort of shows you the initial 3DHP classification for the Green Bay area. Next slide. This sort of shows how that then links into the CCAP. So the imagery on the left-hand side, the CCAP level 1 in the middle, and the CCAP level 2 on the right-hand side, and that sort of shows you the classification system, the level of detail, both spatially and in classification terms of the CCAP dataset. Next slide. And then this is just a quick indication where we haven't really done a huge amount of work on this in the NWI side, but shows the elevation model, and then the areas that are delineated for the particular wetland types. Next slide. And that just shows you it over the imagery, just showing you the information that can be pulled in from that land cover data set. Next slide. Okay, back to you, Jim.
Back to me. So, as Andrew said, they're in the middle of their processing. We're going to be getting chunks of the different layers over the next 5 to 6 months, and with a kind of a final delivery next fall. And beyond that, we'll start working with some of our partners on figuring out how to sort of show this stuff off, kind of take it and use it in various applications. Of course, the big one for us is the coastal habitat restoration, because that's the NOAA side. The soil and water conservation planning, that'll be kind of targeting NRCS needs, and county land and water, and then our different sensitive areas and shoreland zoning is another. We're real excited about being right on top of a tribal area that's doing lots of interesting wetland restoration projects, and to see if the data that we produce is actually going to be helpful to that effort. And then we're hopefully going to be able to start tinkering with the 2D flood modeling, plugging this into some of that type of work. Again, a report to NOAA, and then kind of thinking ahead what to do next, because this is obviously only the beginning of this process. The little map shows there our original area in the green bay in blue. We'd kind of like to go to the full Huck 8 level, the Fox Wolf basins shown there in black. And we've kind of tinkered around, looking at some other areas that might be good for another pilot, like that little corner up there next to Minnesota. And ultimately, we have to turn this into some kind of a business plan that will outline a process for how we do the rest of the state. And one of the things that kind of was really interesting last summer, when we were just thinking about getting this started, was this NOAA came out with this regional climate resilience challenge. It was like, oh, big buckets of money for lots of things. And so we actually put in a pre-proposal for doing the rest of the state based on one map ideas. And I almost thank God we didn't get that money, because we just we are really still at this starting stage. But it was instructive in kind of figuring out what it might take to turn this into a statewide program. And you can kind of see what we're up against here. The little map on the left is our lidar status. We're trying to redo a lot of the areas in blue to QL1, and trying to figure that into the equation. The little map in the middle is actually our CCAP coverage right now, which is pretty extensive. It's pretty nice. We're not like Michigan, but we're in pretty good shape. We'd like to extend that to the rest of the state. And then poor old NWI here. There's a fund, EPA fund called GLRI, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and they are doing some wetland mapping. And so maybe, you know, these little black areas right here are indicative of that. And it's, you know, trying to figure out how to sort of mesh all these things in a real world sort of sense, and that's going to be a challenge. So I think we're at the takeaways. Andrew, do you want to have the honors here?
Sure, I'll close it out here. But you know, I think everybody's got the message here that really what we want to do is create seamless integration between data sets. I think everybody on this call has probably spent much of their training trying to merge data sets with different projection systems and different resolutions together to come up with something that looks nice. And wouldn't it be nice if everything was produced off the same source data at the same scale and interactive? So that's sort of the vision here. You know, I don't pretend to know all the applications that this will eventually support, but I think everybody on the call can think about, well, if I had that data set, wouldn't it be great? I could do all these analyses from this, or I could make it available to the nonprofits to make the analyses. And I think that what we want to be doing as a community is really reducing the barrier to use of data. So if we can, you know, work collaboratively with the federal agencies to promote the standards that they've developed, with obviously local add-ons, because not every state has different requirements, but at least that foundation is consistent. It means that we have standard national data sets that can be used for standard national or large scale analyses. And I think that there's probably 1,001 applications of this, because we understand that if we're able to characterize the landscape well, we can then make good land cover decisions and demonstrate that those decisions are worthwhile. And it's going to be important in terms of protecting water supply, in terms of mitigating the impacts of stormwater runoff, pollution. It'll give us a basis for assessing carbon storage and sequestration, and will provide the basis from which we can then view change and verify what change is happening and be able to come to conclusions on it. So that's really the underlying thought process behind this program.
And I'll just end by saying, yeah, we need to do this, and we need to figure it out, and we, you know, can't wait for stuff to just kind of happen. We kind of have to push the boundaries a little bit here. So we're trying to do that in a nice way. So thank you for listening. Linda, do you want to take over from here?
I absolutely will. Thank you both. I appreciate the information, but maybe more importantly, the aspiration. So I don't see any questions in the chat. If ever, okay, thank you, Eric. And please do put them in the chat, because I try to capture them. You know, there's not much dialogue, Eric. If you want to come off mute and ask directly, that would be fine.
Oh, I didn't really want to.
Oh, okay.
But that's okay. I'm curious how the 30-meter Landsats inform the 1-meter work you're doing, and is there any consideration for NRCS soils to inform the wetlands? You know, some of the other logical connections to make one map.
Yeah. So Eric, thanks for the question. You know, the utilization of 30-meter data to inform or to refine the 1 meter information or the higher resolution information has multiple challenges associated with it, right? So what we believe we can do is get broadleaf, so evergreen deciduous divide from the vegetation. We are not proposing that we are going to get species or any smaller division from that. However, the Landsat time series gives us a lot of phenological information. And so utilizing that information will allow us to label a cover type to that. So if it's a broadleaf area, then it's labeled as aspen. In the 30 meter, it will pull that together. And so what we're using is really the boundaries from the high resolution and using the information content from the 30 meter. And we have multiple 30 meter data sets we can pull from. We understand there's inaccuracies associated with it. And so it's given to, it's not going to be perfect, but it will give you a better starting point than what you have if you just have forest, non-forest. In terms of the soils, I had a conversation actually Friday. Obviously, soils data is integral to both the land cover mapping and the wetland mapping. Likewise, the vegetation, wetlands, and hydrology is important for soils mapping. So it is, although not part of the scope that we're looking at right now, it is probable that these types of data sets, including the byproducts, can be used to help NRCS with soil mapping in a consistent manner. So I think in the same way as the soils help the vegetation, I think the vegetation can also be used to help the soils.
All right, Phil, do you want to come off mute and ask your question? Perhaps he
doesn't have a mic, it says.
Okay, I will go ahead. Phil asked, discuss any challenges integrating the NWI data with the new EDH data.
So what we're doing is utilizing the EDH data to help inform the NWI data, the NWI data creation, right? So, we have NWI. That NWI could be old, it could be inaccurate. So we're actually creating the NWI data anew, and the degree of modification that needs to happen depends on the quality and the vintage of the previous NWI. So we aren't overlaying it in a GIS sense, but we are using it to help inform the new version of the NWI, but utilizing the hydrology from the 3DHP as the hydrology that will be integral in the NWI. So I don't know if that answers that question.
I think so. You're saying that you're refreshing the NDI with more current EDH data.
Yeah, correct. So what? Yeah, and I think it answers that question for Phil. Yeah, so we're not saying, okay, we just overlay and try to mesh it together. We're saying what we're actually doing is updating we're creating a new NWI data layer utilizing the 3DHP so that you don't have that problem of the fact that it doesn't match together.
Sounds good. I'm not going to ask Eric to come off mic because to come off mute because he said he didn't want to. So his question is, please describe multi-year trends in automating your workflow.
Multi-year trends in automating my workflow. Not quite sure.
Andrew, it's Eric. How fast, how fast are these technologies developing? I mean, now you've done great work in Pennsylvania, and now you got stringing together 6 or 8 data sets in Wisconsin. How automated do you expect it to get
Okay,
in the
so
next 2 years.
so what I would say is that as we learn, as the technology improves, as the source data improves, the ability to automate improves. There will always be a manual aspect to this, and I would argue with anybody here who say they can produce a usable map using a fully automated process. And so I think that humans will always be part of it. The end user will always be part of it, but the ability to scale data processing is improving, and it relates. Obviously, machine learning is important, but it also relates to the quality of the input data set and having. What I do want to say is, don't try. We're not going to try to do any of this without lidar. Lidar is fundamental to the success of this, and that's what will be the. So, in terms of multi-year trends, that is something that we are looking at. But my belief is that once we create the accurate base map, that the multi-year trends can be monitored using a much lower resolution data set. Now, whether that is whether we're updating with NAPE or whether we're updating with satellite imagery, but the point is that trends only go in certain specific directions. So once we've got a reliable, accurate base map, we can measure trends, whether it's through Landsat or Sentinel or Planet or NAPE on an ongoing basis. All those are possible. Really depends on the value and the cost of what we're looking at.
Excellent. And then John asked, do you have any plans to address issues with identifying seasonal wetlands from land cover data? In other words, like small tree covered wetlands?
So I mean, I think it's really interesting on what we could do. So what we're doing right now is adhering to federal, at least at the level 1 and the level 2, and NWI, we're adhering to the federal standards, right? So if it's part of if it's a class or a size of class that would be collected within NWI, then that will be collected and it will be marked seasonal. If you want to go the next step, which I believe people will in certain specifics, the idea is then to dig into the data in more detail. So, for example, vernal pools has come up as an issue, or as a question. Can we do that? Well, we have the underlying data sets to do that because we have the lidar that can identify that. We can identify whether it's connected or not connected. So, there's always the opportunity to take it to a greater level of detail. But I think that most federal agencies will say, hey, we've got enough on our hands just getting it to a standard. But I would imagine that many local agencies, states or counties may want to take that and go to another level of detail.
Excellent. John says, thank you. So national standards are critical to a national data set, but there are opportunities at the local and regional level to go deeper. I have one more question. It's from Rick. Go ahead.
Sean's got his hand up.
Well, Sean has to type in the chat like everybody else because I need to capture the question from the chat, Sean. You can elaborate when I tell you to come off of mic. Rick Moore asks, Jim G, have you assessed the cost per Huck 8 watershed or cost per acre based on your deliverables?
We knew this question would come up. The answer is we're not at a point where we can definitively say that we know what the exact costs are going to be. We kind of got a range. You're asking every state, yeah, sure. And so there's a couple ways to look at it. My you know, there's kind of the ways that you know, we're used to seeing the cost per layer, per square mile, that sort of thing. I think we're going to be in that range, and even if we're maybe even a little bit over, I think the ability to go right into analysis from the data will more than make up for cost. So that's my take on it. Andrew, do you want to add your 2 cents?
Yeah, sure. You know, we did discuss this, and I told Jim I'm not giving any numbers over a meeting. But what I think there's, in terms of trends, I believe that the integration of these 3 data sets and development will end up, you know, even if it's, you know, although the functionality will be greater, it will be less expensive because you're not repeating tasks, right? And, you know, so that's one thing. The other thing is it really depends on scale. And the larger the area, that's undertaken, the lower the cost per unit area. And so, you know, if you're dealing with, you know, 1 HUC-10, it's going to be expensive because just setting up the remote sensing infrastructure is expensive. Getting everyone up to speed is expensive. If you start to scale to, you know, the coastline of Wisconsin, the price per square mile goes down. So, and I think we've seen that for pretty much every map generation undertaking. So I think that there's, you know, my belief, and I think once we've finished this project, we will have a much better idea of
Right.
sort of the numeric savings. But those are the 2 things I would say, is that the integration of the data sets should be less expensive than developing them all independently, and the larger the area will bring down the cost per square mile.
It is a goal of the project to kind of figure that out. So.
All right, Steve Fugate asks, can you discuss the challenges with harmonizing different LiDAR data? I've heard the differences in quality levels and the sensors can be difficult to overcome.
So the answer is yes, they can be difficult to overcome. They can be overcome. We have done that on multiple places. We go back to the point cloud. You really can't do it with the derived product. You have to go back to the point cloud and re-examine it, and then you're generally feathering at the edges. This particular project has a QL1 dataset and a QL2 dataset, and that's why we're not proposing, you know, tree segmentation on this project because we don't have QL1 everywhere. So it is challenging, but it can be done. And I do know that also USGS is looking at that question. But you do have to go back to the point cloud and make sure that everything lines up, especially at the edges.
All right. So we have Sean's question. He can come off if he wants to, but he says he's curious to learn more at a high level how you are managing your harmonization work with QL1 and QL2 LiDAR. I think we just touched on that a little bit. And the DEM resolution these QL support, leading into getting an understanding of a consistent DEM resolution for water feature development. You want to elaborate a little bit more? Yeah,
I mean, you know, I'm not the guy doing it. So we have a guy called Adam Pike out of our Kentucky office, and he's the guy who knows all the algorithms. So, yeah, I can link you with him, and he can take you through the technical stuff. In terms of the underlying DEM resolution, we have stuck with a 1 meter bare earth DEM. That doesn't mean that you can't justify generating a higher resolution. However, the requirements for 3DHP is that you derive 3DHP off a 1 meter DEM. And so we are stuck with that as the standard, even though the data may support a higher resolution. So that's in terms of ground resolution. Obviously, in terms of surface model, you can play whatever you want. That becomes much more of a variable you can play with. You could go down to 0.5 meter if you wanted with a QL1, but the ground model, because of the federal requirements, we're sticking at the 1 meter.
Sean, did you want to come off and elaborate at all?
Yeah, it pretty much gets at it. It's a struggle here. We haven't done experimentation and R&D out in Minnesota, but it's something I'm struggling with, where we blanketed the state of Minnesota with QL1, which supports the development of 1/2 meter DM, yet the standards for 3DHP specify 1 meter. At the same time, we're seeing the transition of the base specification for 3DEP going from quality level 2, which supports a 1 meter, to quality level 1. And so I'm curious to what you all experienced there, plus anyone else in the country, for the role of QL1 and a 1/2 meter DEM. And it's really a question that's probably larger than what we have time here for, but that's where I was going with the question. And you've touched on resolution a couple times here now in your answers. So I know states are struggling with 3DHP and how it meets their state's criteria and requirements and expectations. More importantly, how does it meet the expectations of the agencies that we have to go to find funding to provide partnership for a DCA grant submission? And this is where I'm going with how it fits into resolution and meeting the needs of the state, then making it fold into the needs of 3DHP. And those are the complications we're trying to iron out without yet establishing a pilot project in Minnesota.
I would punt that one to USGS.
Yeah.
And I think, I know that Sue had to drop off. I don't know if anybody from USGS wants to take that, or if that's a bigger discussion at another time. I did see Sylvia join. She walked in the room at the wrong time.
Yeah, I'll fill that. Sorry. And it is a balance between trying to make the best possible product for a local application and a nationally consistent product. One of the things that I think, I don't know if we've talked about it here or not, but one of the things that we are working towards is a national seamless DEM based on the 3DEP elevation data, and doing that. And then that will be a 1 meter product and will be sort of the basis to the 3D national topography model. But that's kind of the baseline for the current cycle. We go into next gen 3DEP here in the next few years, and we'll probably reevaluate where we are with 3DHP a few years after that. At some point there is a diminishing marginal return to whether it's plus or minus 7 feet versus plus or minus 3 feet. But that's right now we're trying to thread the needle between a viable national scale product and what is necessary for local applications, and sort of plus or minus 2 meters the 3DEP level hit that mark.
I'm going to jump back. Eric Jesperson asked Jim G. If there any thoughts on the cost of creating new applications to consume one map data?
Oh my. We have lots of plans to test the data that NV5 is making for us. As far as what those end up costing, I guess we'll find out. I think for me personally, the biggie that we're trying to figure out is the climate vulnerability suite of tools. Figuring out where the water is going to go under X rainfall, and then running the various models for changing the land cover, and putting new wetlands in, putting new agricultural practices in, see what the result is. And that whole suite of things, as far as I know, pieces of it exist, but getting them all together, I think will be an exciting challenge for somebody.
All right, and Steve has one final question here. is the plan to make these data sets available in cloud optimized formats, COG, COPCs, SCAC, GeoParquet?
And I would say that it really depends on the agency who's serving them, right? So, there are specific data formats required by the agencies. And so if it's being served at the state level, it really is up to the state to convert them to those formats. Likewise with the federal government, it doesn't really matter. They can all be served in cloud or cloud optimized format, which would make sense. So people can ingest them in the cloud and process them in the cloud. Makes sense.
All right, I think that's all the questions in the chat. Scrolling back to see if I missed anything. If you want to ask an additional question, now would be your last time. All right, well, with that, I will thank our speakers. We appreciate you taking the time. As I mentioned earlier, let me get back to a share here. As I mentioned earlier, this presentation was recorded. We are capturing, as always, the Q&A, and that document will be available. And trying to get to my PowerPoint screen to almost there, folks. All right, so thank you all for your participation. As always, we get together the third Wednesday of the month, 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. You are always, sometimes that'll be an interest group meeting, but mostly it's usually a forum. And our next forum is scheduled for Wednesday, February 21, 3 to 4:30 p.m. as usual. And Sylvia is going to be talking to us about EDH development, guidance and specifications. And again, this will be a follow-up to the state hydrography meeting that is being hosted January 29th. So, and last call for comments, questions. Lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you again to our speakers. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing the right thing according to Lindsay. Let's try it one more time so you can get the information. All right. Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you, Wisconsin. All right. Well, then thank you all for participation, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate you both. Always good to hear what's going on up there.
Got a lot of time to sit around and think about things.
What did somebody ask? Do you have plans or do you have thoughts? And I just want to say it's Jim G. He's got lots of thoughts, right?
Just sitting here twiddling the thumbs. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Well, good luck in the next few months. Hopefully we see you in DC, but if not, we'll see you when we see you.
Okay. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye, guys.